This is M100 to Inwood to 20th Street. This stop is East 127th Street and 2nd Avenue. Next stop, East 125th Street and 2nd Avenue. Transfers available to BX15, BX15 Limited, M15, M15 SBS and M60 SBS. This stop is East 125th Street and 2nd Avenue. Next stop, East 125th Street and 3rd Avenue. Transfers available to BX15, BX15 Limited, M98 Limited, M101 and M101 Limited. This stop is East 125th Street and 3rd Avenue. Next stop, East 125th Street and Lexington Avenue. Transfers available to 4, 5 and 6 trains. BX15, BX15 Limited, M35, M60 SBS, M101, M101 Limited and M103. This stop is East 125th Street and Lexington Avenue. Next stop, East 125th Street and Park Avenue. Transfers available to Metro North. BX15, BX15 Limited, M60 SBS, M98 Limited, M101 and M101 Limited. This stop is East 125th Street and Park Avenue. Next stop, East 125th Street and Madison Avenue. Transfers available to M1 and M1 Limited. This stop is East 125th Street and Madison Avenue. Next stop, West 125th Street and 5th Avenue. Transfers available to M1, M1 Limited, BX15, BX15 Limited, M101, M101 Limited, BXM3 and BXM4. This stop is West 125th Street and 5th Avenue. Next stop, West 125th Street and Malcolm X Boulevard. Transfers available to 2 and 3 trains. M7, BX15, BX15 Limited, M60 SBS, M101, M101 Limited and M102. This stop is West 125th Street and Malcolm X Boulevard. Next stop, West 125th Street and Adam C. Powell Boulevard. Transfers available to M2 and M2 Limited. This stop is West 125th Street and Adam C. Powell Boulevard. Next stop, West 125th Street and Fred Douglass Boulevard. Transfers available to M10, BX15, BX15 Limited, M60 SBS, M101 and M101 Limited. This stop is West 125th Street and Fred Douglass Boulevard. Next stop, West 125th Street and St. Nicholas Avenue. Transfers available to A, B, C and D trains. M3, BX15, BX15 Limited, M101 and M101 Limited. This stop is West 125th Street and St. Nicholas Avenue. Next stop, West 125th Street and Amsterdam Avenue. Transfers available to M11, BX15, BX15 Limited, M60 SBS, M101, M101 Limited and M104. This stop is West 125th Street and Amsterdam Avenue. Next stop, Amsterdam Avenue and West 126th Street. This stop is Amsterdam Avenue and West 126th Street. Next stop, Amsterdam Avenue and West 129th Street. This stop is Amsterdam Avenue and West 129th Street. Next stop, Amsterdam Avenue and West 131st Street. This stop is Amsterdam Avenue and West 131st Street. Next stop, Amsterdam Avenue and West 133rd Street. This stop is Amsterdam Avenue and West 133rd Street. Next stop, Amsterdam Avenue and West 135th Street. Transfer available to M11. This stop is Amsterdam Avenue and West 135th Street. Next stop, Amsterdam Avenue and West 138th Street. This stop is Amsterdam Avenue and West 138th Street. Next stop, Amsterdam Avenue and West 140th Street. This stop is Amsterdam Avenue and West 140th Street. Next stop, Amsterdam Avenue and West 143rd Street. This stop is Amsterdam Avenue and West 143rd Street. Next stop, Amsterdam Avenue and West 145th Street. Transfer available to BX19. This stop is Amsterdam Avenue and West 145th Street. Next stop, Amsterdam Avenue and West 149th Street. This stop is Amsterdam Avenue and West 149th Street. Next stop, Amsterdam Avenue and West 151st Street. This stop is Amsterdam Avenue and West 151st Street. Next stop, Amsterdam Avenue and West 155th Street. Transfers available to C train. M3, BX6, BX6 SBS, M101 and M101 Limited. This stop is Amsterdam Avenue and West 158th Street. Next stop, Amsterdam Avenue and West 161st Street. Transfers available to M101 and M101 Limited. This stop is Amsterdam Avenue and West 161st Street. Next stop, St. Nicholas Avenue and West 163rd Street. Transfer available to M3. This stop is St. Nicholas Avenue and West 163rd Street. Next stop, St. Nicholas Avenue and West 167th Street. Transfers available to 1, A and C trains. M2, M2 Limited, M3, M4, M4 Limited, M5, M5 Limited and BX7. This stop is St. Nicholas Avenue and West 167th Street. Next stop, Broadway and West 171st Street. Transfers available to M5, M5 Limited and BX7. This stop is Broadway and West 171st Street. Next stop, Broadway and West 173rd Street. This stop is Broadway and West 173rd Street. Next stop, Broadway and West 175th Street. Transfers available to M5, M5 Limited and BX7. This stop is Broadway and West 175th Street. Next stop, Broadway and West 178th Street. Transfers available to A train. George Washington Bridge Bus Station. M4, M4 Limited, M5, M5 Limited, BX3, BX7, BX11, BX13, BX35, BX36, BX36 Limited and M98 Limited. This stop is Broadway and West 178th Street. Next stop, Broadway and West 181st Street. Transfers available to BX3, BX7, BX11, BX13, BX35, BX36 and BX36 Limited. This stop is Broadway and West 181st Street. Next stop, Broadway and West 183rd Street. This stop is Broadway and West 183rd Street. Next stop, Broadway and West 187th Street. This stop is Broadway and West 187th Street. Next stop, Broadway and West 189th Street. This stop is Broadway and West 189th Street. Next stop, Broadway and Fairview Avenue. This stop is Broadway and Fairview Avenue. Next stop, Broadway and West 193rd Street. This stop is Broadway and West 193rd Street. Next stop, Broadway and West 197th Street. This stop is Broadway and West 197th Street. Next stop, Broadway and Sherman Avenue. This stop is Broadway and Sherman Avenue. Next stop, Broadway and Arden Street. This stop is Broadway and Arden Street. Next stop, Dyckman Street and Broadway. Transfers available to A train and BX7. This stop is Dyckman Street and Broadway. Next stop, Dyckman Street and Sherman Avenue. Transfer available to BXM1. This stop is Dyckman Street and Sherman Avenue. Next stop, Dyckman Street and Fort George Hill. Transfers available to 1 train. This stop is Dyckman Street and Fort George Hill. Next stop, 10th Avenue and Harlem River Drive. This stop is 10th Avenue and Harlem River Drive. Next stop, 10th Avenue and 202nd Street. This stop is 10th Avenue and 202nd Street. Next stop, 10th Avenue and 207th Street. Transfers available to 1 train. BX12 and BX12 SBS. This stop is 10th Avenue and 207th Street. Next stop, 10th Avenue and Sherman Avenue. This stop is 10th Avenue and Sherman Avenue. Next stop, 10th Avenue and 215th Street. Transfers available to 1 train. This stop is 10th Avenue and 215th Street. Next stop, Broadway and 220th Street. Transfers available to BX7, BX20 and BXM1. This stop is Broadway and 220th Street. This is M100 to Inwood 220th Street.